The clerk's hand didn't grip so much as rest 2 fingers on the crook of my elbow as the barcode chirped and my small chocolate cake inched along the belt. "Ma'am, are you Mrs. Hart, Liam Hart's mother?" His voice was low, almost embarrassed to be speaking at all. I nodded. My throat had gone tight. He bent closer as if to read a label and spoke to the cake instead of to me. "Watch Sienna's people," he whispered. "They spend like the lights will never go out, then make him cover the bill." Before I could find a word to give back, he released me. The scanner sang again, and we were strangers finishing a transaction. I paid, thanked him the way I was raised to, and walked out into a December wind that smelled like salt and tire dust. The parking lot behind Lakeside Market chattered with those small noises cities make when nobody's listening. Bulky carts clanged against railings. A delivery truck idled and coughed. Somewhere, a string of helium balloons needled the sky until one broke free and became a bright, pointless dot. Liam was waiting where we had agreed he would be, 2 rows over by the cart corral, already waving with the warmth he never lost as a boy. I should have gone straight to him. Instead, curiosity put a thumb on my sternum and pressed. I slipped around the back of the building, past the compost bins, and glass recycling to a strip of cracked asphalt that looked toward the automatic doors without being obvious. 2 green dumpsters threw a clean-edged rectangle of shadow across the ground. I stood in it and wrapped both hands around the cake box as if the cardboard might steady me. Maybe the young man had mixed up his rumors. Maybe he had a grudge I knew nothing about. Either way, I've lived long enough to learn the difference between a gossip's thrill and a warning that trembles. Mine was trembling. 5 minutes later, the doors sighed open and Gerald Pike Sienna's father walked out as if a camera were following him. He carried 3 glossy black shopping bags that looked like puddles catching light. They weren't paper sacks from the store. Their handles recorded the kind boutiques use when they want you to keep the bag forever. He pressed a key fob. A pale gray crossover flashed its headlights and unlocked with a cheerful chirp. A temporary dealer tag winked from the bumper. He nested the bags into the cargo area with careful hands, the way you place glass or a promise, and took a call that seemed to please him. The smile he wore wasn't relief. It was the ease of a man who expects the scales to tip his way. I watched and I tried to be fair. I'm 68 years old, retired from the front desk at a clinic in Akron, and I have the kind of thrift you learn from counting copays with strangers. I raised Liam with coupons and patience, and when he brought Sienna home 3 years ago, beautiful, careful with her words. A little remote the way some people are when they're new, I decided to like her first and let everything else come later. Her parents were polite the handful of times we met. Marla, her mother, asked about my joints. Gerald called me Mrs. Hart, never Evelyn, and held doors. But the calls kept arriving at my son's phone. Small emergencies with big mouths. Rent short this month. A prescription the insurance messed up again. The breaks, always the breaks. I don't enjoy seeing anyone struggle, and Liam, least of all, he hates that helpless look people get. More than once, I slipped cash from the grocery envelope into an unmarked card and told myself God sees intent, not line items. Still, one winter morning when Sienna said Gerald's therapy sessions had doubled in cost and they were suffocating, I brought $80 from my coffee tin and tucked it into their mailbox after dark. The next afternoon, waiting at a bus stop on Maple, I watched Gerald drive by. He wore a navy blazer sharp enough to draw a line, a watch with a face you could read from across the room, and a piece I couldn't make fit the picture I'd been given. I told myself the blazer was borrowed. I told myself the watch had sentimental value. I told myself I was being small. Another time, Sienna mentioned in passing that she and Liam had been asked to a rooftop place downtown, the sort where the table linens have names. Friends insisted on treating, she said, picking at a thread on the sleeve of her sweater. That night on my phone, I scrolled past a photograph of Gerald with a glass lifted high, the caption, "Spoiling Dad, he deserves the best." Maybe, I thought. Maybe they were celebrating news I hadn't heard yet. Maybe the picture was old. The truth is, you can balance a dozen maybes, one on top of another, and build yourself a tower with no door. I've done it before in smaller ways. It keeps the peace. It also keeps the facts out. Out behind the market, Gerald ended his call, smoothed his jacket, and went back inside with the loose-shouldered stride of someone for whom doors open. My fingers ached from holding the cake box. I walked the long way around to Liam's car, wiped my expression clean, and slid into the passenger seat. "Was it heavy?" he asked, nudging the heater toward me, the way he always had. Gentle automatic. He was humming under his breath some tune that had ridden in with him from childhood. I could have come in and grabbed it. "It's fine," I said, and meant only that I didn't want to put any weight at all on him yet. He turned the key and we joined the river of cars on Lakeshore, all of us swimming in the same direction with our blinkers like fish flashing in agreement. Houses gave way and then came back again in tidy rows. As the glass blurred past, small details settled in my lap like mail I'd been refusing to open. New curtains in their living room that Sienna had called thrifted, but which hung with the crispness of a store window. The smartwatch Gerald wore at Sunday lunch, its face answering invisible messages while he asked after Liam's workload. The string of pearls that Sienna had laughed off as costume cool against her throat as she reached for the salt. Maybe I have trained myself too well to let alarms ring in another room. It's not that I fear noise. I fear the kind of conversation that leaves people sleeping back to back and pretending their backs are warm. That week, I lay awake with the shape of the clerk's whisper turning over and over. On Saturday, I told Liam I was going to the West Bank Farmers Market. He offered to drop me. I said I'd take the bus. The truth was I wanted the freedom to be early and then to be nothing at all. After the market's first rush, I crossed to a narrow cafe with windows like open eyes and a chipped blue door. The coffee was strong and tasted a little of orange peel. From a corner table, I could see the northbound lanes and the turnoff toward Riverside Drive. If Gerald really spent his afternoons at the hardware store, he'd likely pass this way. If he didn't, it would be useful to know where the stream carried him instead. At noon, exactly, some people are clockwork, even when they think no one is watching. A familiar gray crossover rolled by, clean enough to tilt the sky. He didn't signal for the strip mall. He took Riverside past houses with river stones stacked like promises and turned through a black iron gate. The sign on the brick column read, Brookside Athletic Club, in letters tall enough to knock over a lie. A guard in a dark jacket waved him through without so much as a pause. I stayed until my cup grew cold and left a ring, the shape of a small moon on the table. 2 hours later, the same car came back out, Gerald whistling as if the day had proved him right. He carried a leather folio instead of groceries. His posture had changed, slightly taller, the way people stand when they've shaken hands with someone who matters. I let a bus pass me and walked instead. The air had that coppery taste winter gets near the river. Outside a salon 2 blocks from my place, 2 women adjusted their scarves and scolded the wind. "Did you see Sienna Pike last week?" one asked, wrapping her red plaid closer. "Emerald dress." My granddaughter said the price made her blush at the register. "And the creams," the other said, laughing softly. "French with caps like little crowns." She bought 3. I pretended to be checking my phone and tuned my ears the way you do when the thing being said is trying to hide. Their voices were not bright with pettiness. They were tired in the way people are when the same picture hangs crooked every time they pass. At my building, a narrow brick place with a railing that stays cold even in July, I set the cake on the kitchen counter and stood for a long minute with both palms flat. Through the window, the river kept going, minding its own deep business. I thought about Liam's humming. I thought about the clerk who couldn't meet my eyes, and the way Gerald set those bags down as if he deserved everything he touched. It is possible to be kind and quiet and wrong. It is possible to spend years believing what keeps you comfortable. I am not proud of that. I am also not helpless. I rinsed my coffee mug, stacked it upside down to dry, and opened a notebook I keep for lists. I wrote the day and time, the route, the club's name, because ink is better than memory when memory wants to be merciful. Then I sat and listened to the buildings settle the way bodies do after a long day, and I made a decision simple enough to be steady. I would watch with both eyes. I would collect what can't be explained away. I would stop making a tower out of maybes and step down to the ground where the facts stand. That resolve didn't make the room warmer. It did make the air easier to breathe. The first days after I wrote down Brookside Athletic Club felt like holding a bowl of water to the brim. Nothing sloshed over. I moved carefully, set things down, softly, said little. I went about my errands, warmed soup, folded towels warm from the dryer. When Liam dropped by after a late shift, he took his shoes off at the door, even though I told him not to fuss. We ate quietly, close enough for our elbows to bump. I didn't mention the club or the women outside the salon. He was tired. I could see it in the way he blinked. On Thursday evening, Sienna called while Liam was rinsing our plates. I could hear her through the speaker, the lightness in her tone climbing over the hiss of the faucet. "Mom and Dad want us over on Sunday," she said. "Just lunch, nothing formal." Liam glanced at me, a half smile, asking if I'd mind company. Of course, I said. It came out very even. I let my face do nothing else. We drove out on Sunday under a sky that looked ironed. The neighborhood the Pikes called Stonebridge had that new subdivision sameness that money makes: squared hedges, stone mailboxes, walkways edged like diagrams. Their house wore fresh paint the color of milk and almonds. Sienna opened the door before we rang. She hugged me, and the perfume she wore, a citrus bloom I knew from the glass counter at Mallard's, clung to my coat. "You look wonderful," she said. Her eyes skimmed me quickly as if checking her own reflection in mine. Inside, everything gleamed in the way things do when they've been recently purchased. The living room was smaller than I remembered, but felt fuller. A new leather sectional in a brown so dark it bred shadows. A television the size of a window where a window didn't fit, 3 crystal vases with roses too perfect to have ridden home in the back seat. Gerald stood from the sofa with the smoothness of someone trying on a different age. "Mrs. Hart," he said, and took my hand as if we were at a receiving line. Marla floated in with a platter. We found the loveliest butcher, she said, setting down lamb studded with garlic slivers, rosemary leaning like weathered sails, and saffron for the rice. It's such a treat when you catch a discount at the import store. She had tied an apron over a silk blouse the shade of ripe peaches. We sat. The wine Gerald opened had a dark label and a gold crest I recognized from a specialty shop near the river, the place where the clerk wraps bottles in tissue paper as if they bruise. $60 at least. Last week I had counted the shelf stickers with nothing to do, while a man in front of me argued about corks. A friend sent it, Gerald said when he saw me notice. He's in the trade. He smiled small and neat. We made the careful talk families make when they are trying to like one another on schedule. Liam described a new scheduling system at the hospital that smoothed the worst of the weekend crush. I've been picking up a few nights, he added almost apologetically. We had some surprises with the car. Sienna reached for his wrist without looking at him the way you quiet a song on your phone. Liam is such a rock, she said. We're lucky. The word we rested softly in the middle of the table and asked to be believed. I watched not the way a judge watches, but the way a librarian does cataloging, noting cross-references. Sienna's earrings caught the light small pearls set in gold, the posts thick enough to be real. Her nails were the pale neutral color that takes an hour in a chair to achieve. When Marla leaned over to pour more wine, the seams of the sofa flashed a thread so fresh it was still deciding whether to lie down. Halfway through, a neighbor came by with a chilled bottle of champagne held in a towel like an infant. Couldn't stay, he said, beaming into the room without crossing the rug. Just wanted to say thank you for last weekend. He aimed the gratitude more at Gerald than at the house. The fundraiser was incredible. The chef. My wife is still talking about the oysters. He laughed, nodded to each of us as if we'd been on a committee together, and left his card on the console table. Please tell Daniel I'll email that contact, Gerald called after him. The champagne waited on the sideboard, unopened, the label one I'd seen tagged at $90 in a glass case. If there was a thread of hardship anywhere in the house, it hid behind the pantry door and held its breath. Later, coffee steamed in cups thin enough to show the color through. The conversation slid toward Liam's schedule again. The overtime will taper soon, he said, unworried in the way you are when you've already made the decision. Sienna's mouth smiled, but her eyes did a small fast thing, and Marla's glance met Gerald's and dropped as if someone had called a number. It lasted less than a beat. You could miss it while buttering bread. I did not. When Liam offered to help clean up, Marla shooed him gently. You two should take a walk, she said. It's lovely out. The day had cooled and sharpened. We walked to the end of the block where a storm drain clicked. Liam told me about a patient who had brought him a paper crane. For luck, he said, embarrassed by the sweetness of it. It's in my locker. I put my hand through his arm. We didn't mention the club or the roses or the neighbor with the champagne. Some things are too heavy to lift while standing. After we said our goodbyes and drove back along the river, I kept my face turned to the window, not hiding, exactly steadying. Liam hummed without knowing. I studied my reflection in the glass, the line near my mouth I inherited from my mother, the small scar under my chin from falling off a porch when I was 7. In the glass, I looked like someone who should have her mind made up. I did. The messages started Tuesday afternoon, not with a ring, but with the quiet insistence of a phone lighting the table. The clerk from Lakeside, his name appeared in the text as Miguel Market, because that is what he had said when he handed my change back, had sent a photograph. It was taken from a counter and angled to catch the full width, a receipt as long as my forearm. The date was 2 days after the lunch. Imported seafood. French cheeses with names that sounded like the ends of songs. 2 bottles of champagne listed as $90 each. The total balanced at the bottom like the last heavy book on a shelf. The printed name Gerald Pike sat neat and certain. Thought you should see, he wrote. They come through like this pretty regular. I thanked him. I asked him to be careful. My thumbs trembled not from shock but from the knowledge that I had expected the evidence, and it had obliged. The second message arrived the next morning. Another receipt, another week, another sum that would ask any family to sit down together and plan. This one listed caviar, the name so frank on the paper it made me blush though I was alone. Again the neat print, Gerald Pike. That evening the landline rang, the sound older than the rest of my life. Miss Hart. The voice was a woman's, low and a little breathless from the effort of deciding to call. This is Margaret Delaney, Mrs. Delaney, from Elm Row. We've met at the parish sale. I'm so sorry to disturb you. She did not sound like a woman who enjoyed disturbing anyone. She sounded like someone who had tried not to. I heard, well, that you're Liam's mother. A pause as if arranging the furniture of her courage. I thought you should know the Pikes had one of those catered affairs this weekend. Tents, rental glassware, the whole bit. It wasn't a fundraiser, there were birthday banners. My grandson was hired to help and he told me about the ice sculpture. She said ice sculpture the way one says meteor. It was extravagant. After I heard Sienna mention hospital bills at the corner, Her voice stumbled. I don't want to meddle. I only thought, thank you, Mrs. Delaney, I said. I kept my voice even because hers was not. We spoke for a few minutes more, and then I stood in my kitchen with the receiver warm in my hand, and the afternoon separating itself into before and after. Wednesday night, Liam stopped by after another shift. He looked handsome and worn in a way that made me want to tell him things he already knew. Eat, sleep, put your feet up, but he was not a child, and that was a comfort. We sat at the table. I poured tea that had gone past the steeping point. He didn't comment. For a moment, I traced the ring a mug had left on the wood until the circle closed. Liam, I said, and laid my phone between us. I want you to see some things. He frowned without impatience. He is good at starting from zero. I opened the photographs. The receipts lit the small kitchen, the numbers clean and unashamed. The dates aligned with nothing in particular except the claim 2 nights ago that the family had some bills we didn't expect, and could we help with a gap? I did not say any of that. I let the paper do its own work. At first he was quiet in the way he is when a doctor draws a curtain and asks him to listen. Then he pointed to the name at the bottom like a student finding his own handwriting and not recognizing it. These could be anyone's mom. The word mom had more corners than it usually did. Maybe he picked up something for a work thing. Maybe it's a mix-up at the register. Maybe, I said. The second receipt waited under my thumb. I slid it forward. There are more. He scrolled. The kitchen seemed to hold its breath. He swallowed hard enough to sound like a choice. Where did you get these? His voice didn't crack. It thinned as if he had stepped onto a bridge that swayed. From the market clerk, I said. Miguel. He recognized me. He's seen them, Liam. I let the other details come not as a case laid out, but as someone setting what they've found on a table. The neighbor with the champagne. The fundraiser that was not a fundraiser. The women outside the salon weary rather than gleeful. The club with the gate and the guard who didn't ask a name. Liam sat back the chair, knocking gently against the wall. He rubbed his forehead with 2 fingers like an eraser. No, he said, but the word had no place to rest. No, Sienna would tell me. If there was, she would tell me. He sounded like a man asking a locked door for a favor. I don't know what Sienna would do, I said. I know what I've seen. I was careful with my voice the way you are careful with a flame near curtains. He stood up, paced the width of the kitchen twice, then pressed his hands on the table as if it were a dock, and he were steadying himself to step into a small boat. He looked younger and then older and then exactly his age. I need to know, he said, finally every word slow and upright. I need to know for sure. He lifted the phone again, went through the photographs as if a different order could tell a different story. It didn't. Can I? He began and stopped. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I sent the images to his phone. He watched the tiny bar inch across the screen and nodded once when it completed, as if there were someone to signal at a distance. Thank you, he said, and looked at me directly for the first time since he sat down. His eyes were clear the way a lake is clear when the wind drops. He put the phone in his pocket like something that might fall out and shatter. We washed the cups together. He dried his hands on a towel that had been a gift from a nurse who liked lemons. At the door, he bent to put on his shoes and paused halfway, his fingers tightening the laces until the loops were small. I'm not angry at you, he said, straightening. He sounded surprised by the fact. I don't know what I am. You don't have to yet, I said. The hallway light made a ring on his hair. He touched my shoulder not for comfort, but to be certain of the distance. Then he left the door closing softly, the kind of soft you use when someone's sleeping. After he went, I sat back down at the table as if I had been told to wait. The radiator hissed and clicked. On the sill, the spider plant I'd divided from a neighbor's cuttings threw thin green shadows on the paint. I thought about the cake that had started this, how small it had been, how light in my hands, how perfect its frosting looked under the market lights. I thought about Miguel, who had kept his eyes down the way someone does when they are keeping your secret for you. I wrote the new dates beside the old ones. The ink looked decisive even as my hand shook. Thursday brought a quiet morning and then the sound of work boots in the stairwell. The mail slot chattered and settled. I found 2 catalogs, a padded envelope for upstairs, and a single sheet of paper that had folded itself into the corner like a bird. It was an advertisement for a catering company, all cream cardstock and gold ink, the logo pressed so deep you could feel it. I put it under the magnet shaped like a lighthouse. I did not know why. Later, I would take it down and throw it away without reading the back. For now, it just hung there, a small, clean rectangle beside the grocery list. That night, when I lay down, the springs in my mattress sounded like a tired orchestra tuning. The neighborhood quieted as it always does. One last car door, a laugh from the sidewalk, someone dragging a bin to the curb. I listened to the building breathe and let my thoughts arrange themselves without rushing them. The receipts existed now, whether I looked at them or not. The neighbor's story was not a rumor. It contained weather and tents and ice. The house had been bright with newness, the roses wet, as if they believed they were still in a field. In the morning, I woke before the alarm and watched light steal in across the floorboards. I made oatmeal, ate half, and left the rest cooling in the bowl for the sparrows on the sill. I took the notebook from the drawer, added times to the dates, then shut it and put it back, a simple act, but it made the day feel less like a hallway and more like a room with furniture you could name. Liam texted at noon, "Can I stop by after work?" A simple question bare of punctuation. I typed back yes. I didn't set out plates or fold napkins or rehearse anything I might say. The thing about facts is that they require less staging than you think. They sit, they wait, they are patient even when we are not. He arrived as the sky turned the color of old tin. He was paler than he had been 2 nights ago, but there was a steadiness to him that hadn't been there either, as if the bridge had stopped moving under his feet. He sat, took a breath that asked a favor of the room, and opened his phone. The light fell across our hands and made them look like strangers. We didn't discuss what to call anything. He didn't ask me what I wanted him to do. I didn't tell him what I feared. We looked at numbers and names and lines that matched other lines. When he stood, his chair hardly made a sound. He thanked me again this time, not surprised. At the door, he touched my shoulder as if we were exchanging something without a label. When he left, the air changed in the way it does after a window has been opened and closed again. I washed the cups, turned off the light over the sink, and went to the window to see the river climb the dark. The lighthouse magnet held the catering card in place. The list beside it had 3 items: milk, bread, patience. I smiled despite myself and crossed out the last word with the side of my thumb so it left a soft gray smear. The room settled. I let it. Then I reached for my coat. The night had thinned to its coldest thread by the time I came back upstairs. My coat kept the wind out, but not the feeling that air had learned a new weight. I set the keys in their dish and stood listening to the hush that lifts after a stairwell door clicks shut. The lighthouse magnet held the catering card as if it had always been there. I made tea I didn't want and watched the steam walk away. Liam texted a little after 10 home. A minute later, I need to look through some things. Don't worry. The words sat on the screen like stones laid in a shallow creek, simple and passable. I put the phone face down, then turned it over again. There was nothing to do with my hands that would make time behave. Just past midnight, the phone rang. He didn't ease in with small talk. "Mom," he said, his voice lower, not from secrecy, but from the strain of climbing. "I found something." I sat at the kitchen table as if the chair had called my name. "Tell me." "I started with the closet," he said. I could hear drawers sliding and a zipper somewhere in the room with him. It felt wrong. "I know, but I needed to know what our life looked like when I wasn't in the room." He let the sentence sink. There were bags. From places downtown Eden Row, Caldwell and Finch. Some with tissue still in them. A dress with the tag on. A bracelet in a velvet pouch. He breathed as if trying not to fog glass. And then a notebook. Spiral bound. Sienna's handwriting. Columns. He described it the way a medic gives a report, because facts make a better bridge than guesses. Dates along the left margin in neat blue ink. A column labeled emergency with headings I recognized by audio. Memory, rent, Gap RX copay. Brake pads. Dad's procedure, a column of amounts. And beside some entries, a note about who to call first. Liam circled in pencil, sometimes underlined twice. He flipped pages while he spoke. Paper rasped like a dry leaf. "There's an entry for Mother's crown replacement, $1. $800, he said quietly, and on the same date. He stopped long enough that I could hear him move the notebook, shifting against his knee. Same date as Miguel's champagne receipt. My hands had found each other and held on. "Is there anything else written there?" I asked, and kept my voice in the shallow end. He hesitated. At the bottom of the page, "If he hesitates, remind him he owes us after the roof leak." The words reached my kitchen with their own temperature. We had paid for the patch when a storm peeled back shingles the month after their wedding. I had been glad to help. It had felt like building a path. "Are you alone?" I asked. "For now," he said. Sienna ran to the drugstore. She left her phone. She'll be back. The quiet that followed was less than a minute and more than a pause. "I'm going to put this on the table," he said, meaning the notebook. "And the receipts. I'm done talking to shadows." "Liam," I said. "I know," he answered, though I hadn't said anything yet. "I know. The line went dead with the small, soft sound of a clean decision. I didn't move. It's strange what a body elects to do while waiting. Mine chose to inventory the kitchen, cups in their places, the old kettle with its dent where it met the tile 10 years ago, the plant in the window throwing thin lines across the sink. On the refrigerator, the catering card's gold letters shone like a trick of light, Fête & Co. The ampersand curled as if it hadn't decided which side it liked better. I was still at the table when my phone lit again. A text, single sentence, she's back. Then nothing for a while that could be measured without both hands. When he called, he didn't have to say who he was. She laughed, he said carefully. Not mean at first, startled. Said the notebook was old household notes, that I was being dramatic. She put her hand on the cover like she could press it back into being a grocery list. He exhaled. I asked about dates. I read them out loud. Brake pads, $650. The day I left my shift to wire money from the ATM in the lobby. The same day there's a Caldwell and Finch charge in the banking app for alterations and the mother's crown replacement. She said her mom's dentist did a kindness. I showed her the champagne. He didn't rush. He unspooled. She kept saying we like there was a fog. I should be standing inside with her to see it right. Then she asked where the receipts came from, like the source could smudge the ink. I heard a knock, a door opening, the quick arrangement of polite voices. Gerald just walked in, he said softly. The line stayed open. I heard the shape of the room, a coat hitting a hook, a belt creak, the scrape of a chair. Gerald's tone came in smooth and paternal. Son, he said, finding a word that wasn't his and weighing it anyway. Before you jump to conclusions, let me explain. Explain, Liam said. His voice had a new stillness, the kind that gathers before weather changes. I could picture the surface of the table, the spiral-bound notebook square to the wood, my phone-captured receipts fanned like cards the pen Sienna kept in the drawer with rubber bands and menu coupons. I heard a fingertip tap the notebook once, twice, as if to check whether paper could bruise. Gerald started with the currency of charm. We've had help, and we've given help, he said. Sometimes the timing looks coincidental. Sometimes when there's a dinner, it's because I'm courting a client that will secure us for months, and the costs are part of a bigger picture. He tried to make the words build a balcony where they could all step out and admire the view. And the notebook, Liam asked. He's not a man who likes backing people into corners, but he is good at putting nouns where they belong. Household records, Gerald said lightly. Notes Sienna kept when we were juggling multiple needs. The wording may look pointed. We were keeping track. He chuckled in a way meant to deflate, to teach everyone to breathe in his rhythm. You know how Marla is with her labels. Why does Liam appear on 4 pages underlined? Twice my son asked calmly with reminders about how to frame things for me. He didn't raise his voice. In the silence that followed, I heard Sienna shift in her chair. Because you're dependable, Gerald said. The charm thinned. You do what needs doing. And when the needs are oysters and champagne, Liam kept the tone level. When they're a club with a gate and a guard who knows your name, there was another chair noise and Sienna's voice moving in close. You had no right to go through my things. The pitch sharpened the way glass does when you tap its rim. This is invasive. You've never understood how complicated my family's situation is. I manage it. I protect them. That book is just shorthand. Liam let the word protect sit until it cooled. Protect from what he asked. From the pressure of telling me the truth. From humiliation, she snapped. From your judgments. From scarcity you grew up worshiping like a virtue. This is how life works, where people actually move forward. Relationships favors reciprocity. You make it small because you like your life small. I heard my son stand. A chairfoot found a groove and stopped. He spoke without heat. I make it honest. Keys touched the table. For a moment, I thought they were his. Then Gerald's voice bent around the room, losing its last softness. The words arrived without decoration. You made it easy, he said. He sounded tired of disguises. You are easy. You want to be the man who fixes things. We needed fixing. We asked. You said yes. Don't turn it into a thesis. Sienna hissed dad warning or plea. It didn't matter which. The silence that followed had a different shape. I sat on my side of the city and let it draw its outline. When Liam spoke again, he didn't reach for larger words. I married you, he said to his wife. I didn't audition to be your instrument. She tried new angles at speed, like someone selecting outfits and finding each one too honest. You're overreacting. You're tired. You've been influenced. Then harder. You owe my family. We gave you entry. We gave you better circles. You would never. He cut across her gently. I owe no one the right to turn me into a balance transfer. The notebook closed with the soft slap of cardboard. A drawer slid. I heard the rustle of a duffel bag, zippers bitten and pulled. The practical sounds of leaving. He didn't hang up. I listened to the smallest domestic things begin to separate. A toothbrush dropped into a pocket, a spare shirt shaken once, the sound of his wallet thumping into the bag. Sienna's voice moved with him, words starting to fray. She promised to explain. She promised to change. She promised nothing was as it looked. Then the promises folded into threats that used the future like a fence. You'll be alone. Nobody will give you what I gave you. You'll regret this. Her breath caught. The building's hall light must have clicked on. Footsteps echoed. The door opened and I heard the hallway's hollow register. Mom, he said, as if the room he was stepping into needed to hear my name to be safe. I'm coming over. I put on the kettle because there is no point reinventing comfort. He knocked with his knuckles as he has since he was 10 and started distinguishing privacy from secretiveness. When I opened the door, the wind came in behind him for a second, then changed its mind. He set the duffel near the radiator, not heavy, just wide with the present. The notebook rested on top like a small square animal that had decided to be quiet. We didn't say much at first. We are good at quiet. He took off his shoes. I folded my hands to stop myself from touching his face. He sat at the table and put the notebook in the middle. The receipts I had printed lay in a stack beside it, their thermal ink already planning to fade. We looked at them the way people look at family photographs, after a funeral, steady and kinder than the paper deserves. He told me pieces not in order, because order belongs to other kinds of nights. He described Sienna's 1,000 small deflections and the one large admission lodged inside Gerald's sentence. He described how the apartment looked in the urgency of truth. A coffee ring he'd never noticed, a chip in the countertop, shaped like Ohio, a window frame that was never quite square that now seemed to tilt more. He described taking the towel from the bathroom and drying a cup just to keep his hands from breaking something that wasn't dishes. I'm sorry I said not for what I had done because I would do it again, but because sometimes the only fitting word is the one that admits there isn't one. He nodded without resentment. We made sandwiches, the late kind that taste better than they merit. He ate half of his and left the rest folded on his plate, the bread readjusting itself with a soft sigh. After a while, he reached for the notebook again and opened to a page from months back. His finger traced a line item. Dad's therapy, $200. That day, I worked a double. I brought over soup from the cafeteria. He had a steak that night. Remember, he posted a picture. He wasn't building a case now. He was matching weather to dates. I went to bed before midnight and woke up like I'd swallowed a stone. The kettle on the stove gave a low animal sound that meant it would boil if someone asked it to. I poured water over new tea, and the smell lifted just enough weight from the room to make the next part possible. Liam stared into the cup until it stopped being a mirror. When he said, "You made it easy," he murmured something and my chest sat down. We let the radiator fill the pauses. Pipes clicked and cooled. On the sill, the spider plant made a small moving shadow with the register air. Across the street, a bedroom lamp went off and came back on, indecisive. The city made its agreeable noises, distant siren blurred by distance, a bus giving itself permission to leave. He asked if he could sleep on the couch. I told him yes, and brought out a blanket that remembers him from fevers and first day of college nerves. He stretched out and faced the back cushion the way he did as a boy, one arm curled under his head, the other dropped so the hand hung beyond the edge as if holding on to air. I stood for a minute and watched his breath find an even ledger of its own. On the table, the notebook lay open to the page with the crown replacement and the penciled instruction meant to be used like a lever. I put my palm lightly on the paper, not to erase, not to bless, just to mark that it had met resistance. Sometime close to dawn, the heat clanked awake again, and the floor lifted a thin warmth into the room. I slept in the chair with my sweater over my knees, and woke to the sound of Liam boiling water and trying not to in a strange kitchen. He had found the good mugs without looking. He handed me one and sat the night wearing off him as light filled in the edges. We didn't prepare speeches. We didn't tune ourselves for anyone else's benefit. He reached for the notebook and closed it. His hands were steady. We ate the halves of the sandwiches we hadn't finished. We left the catering card where it was gold letters offering their silky, incorrect promise. Outside, a truck lifted bins and set them down again. The river threw up a brief shine along its slope and then hid it. Liam put the notebook in his bag. He zipped it slowly, teeth meeting teeth in a line. He looked at me not for permission, not for advice, simply to make an inventory of what was still true. I held his look. The room steadied. The day did what days are made to do, move forward one detail at a time. By noon, the notebook had a spine scar where it had been opened and closed too often. Liam set it on the table between us, as if it might still change shape if we looked away. He rinsed his cup, dried it with the lemon print towel, and stood there a second longer than anyone needs to after a simple chore. Then he put on his coat. "I need to get the rest of my things," he said. It sounded like reading a line from a list, not asking permission from it. I walked him to the stairs and watched his shoulders find the angle a person uses when they've decided what to pick up and what to put down. The hallway smelled faintly of soap and onions from someone's lunch. In the quiet that followed, the radiator clicked and then slept. He returned before dusk, the duffel wider, the notebook still on top. The air around him carried a chill in the subdued static of rooms recently left. He set the bag by the radiator again and leaned his forehead against the wall like someone who has stepped off a long train. "She wasn't home," he said. "Her mother was. She kept calling me dear like there was a holiday we'd both forgotten." He lifted his hand, then let it fall. I took what was mine. The next days arranged themselves without asking us what we thought. A friend from the hospital recommended an attorney. Copies were made, the notebook's pages flattened, under glass, the receipts printed from my phone and stapled into a thin sheaf. Miguel wrote out what he'd seen on steady lines, the market's letterhead in a corner like a small witness. I went once to the office with Liam and sat under a frame print of a boat where the water was suggested more than described. The lawyer asked Liam to tell the story too plainly for anyone to misunderstand it. He did, with the same clean tone he uses when charting vitals. Sienna called twice. The first time she sounded like someone reading quickly from cards, confusion offense, a promise to clear everything up when the week calmed down. The second call had the shape of a sob pressed too hard into the receiver. Liam listened both times and said, "Only, I can't do this on the phone." When she texted, the bubbles came in bursts, explanations that were really rearrangements, then questions that wanted to be orders, then a single line, "Don't ruin us," that sat on the screen until the battery icon thinned. A week later, we were in a conference room at a downtown building that smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and coffee from a machine that doesn't know the meaning of the word fresh. On the table, water in squat pitchers, a peppermint dish no one touched, and a stack of manila folders that made the room feel like it had a second, quieter language. Sienna sat across from Liam with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had a shine. Gerald's jaw worked as if he were measuring out words in grains. Marla adjusted her scarf and kept finding new ways to smooth the silk. Their attorney tried on several coats in quick succession. Misunderstanding, coincidence, and unfortunate tone in some of the notebook entries that doesn't reflect intent. When intent turned thin, they reached for context: Gerald's client dinners, Marla's health scares, the dignity of trying to maintain appearances. Liam didn't interrupt. When it was his turn, he slid the copies forward and named dates. He kept his voice even. No one raised theirs. There was a moment, the kind that is less than a minute, but more than a breath, when both rooms in the building seemed to share one wall, the one where a person wants to be believed, and the one where paper doesn't care who is talking. The settlement started there. Numbers took off their coats and sat down. Over 2 years, just over $20,000 had left our side and entered the other as if through a door that never squeaked. When we rode the elevator down, Liam didn't speak. The cables hummed the small song they always hum, a metallic kindness. Outside, the river kept its shape. A woman pushed a stroller past the courthouse steps. The wind came around the corner with a clean edge and visited our faces like a hand checking for fever. "I'll go back to the apartment," he said. "I want to sleep in my own air." He kissed my hair and walked away with the kind of straightness that isn't stiff, only sure. Paper did what paper does. Weeks ticked. Court dates made boxes on calendars. Statements arrived in envelopes with transparent windows. When the decree came through, the signature dragged a faint blue valley along the bottom of the page. Liam folded it once and slid it into a manila file he had labeled in pencil, then wrote the date smaller in the corner as if it were a thought he didn't want to forget but didn't wish to revisit. Sienna appeared at my door on a Tuesday afternoon without makeup and with a coat she hadn't fastened. The light in the hallway made her look both younger and less arranged, as if she had been cut out from her own reflection and pasted onto my floor. "Mrs. Hart," she said. "May I come in?" Her voice wobbled and then held. I opened the door wide enough to step aside and still know where I was. In the kitchen, she wrapped her hands around her cup and didn't drink. She tried a few sentences, how everything had spun too fast, how she and Liam were good together when the room was smaller, how families drift into roles the way rivers find low places. She reached for the old argument as if it might have aged into something else. "Could you talk to him?" she asked. "Just so he doesn't harden." I looked at her not as a jury would, but as a woman does when she has witnessed a pattern and is resisting the impulse to narrate it. "He can talk to you," I said. "He always has." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lower it either. "I'm not the door you knock on for that." She tried to smile and found no place to set it. On the way out, she paused by the magneted catering card. "Oh," she said, tone caught between memory and performance. "Fat & Co. They're very good." She left without finishing the thought. The hall light clicked off behind her, and for a second the door's painted wood felt like a living thing holding and then letting go. Liam moved into a small place within walking distance of the hospital, a third-floor unit with floors that spoke when you crossed them and a narrow balcony that could hold one chair and a cup of something warm. We carried up a mattress and a borrowed table. He bought 2 plates, 2 bowls, 4 forks, because that is the number that makes a drawer feel domestic. The first night there, we ate soup from paper containers and pretended the echo was on purpose. When I left, he stood in the doorway with the porch light from across the alley stringing him in a handful of gold beads. He came by most Sundays. We didn't make an arrangement of it. The day made one for us. Sometimes he brought herbs in a paper sleeve from the market. Sometimes he brought nothing, and we both pretended that absence was a kind of gift. He looked younger by degrees that wouldn't register on a ruler. He slept more. He hummed again without hearing himself do it. Once I caught him tracing the seam in my table with his fingertip, the way children do when they are seeing how straight something really is. News moved as it always moves through neighborhoods that share a river sideways politely fast. Someone said the Pikes were selling their house. Someone else that a vendor had filed a claim for unpaid fees from a private event. It arrived without relish the way weather does. This happened and then this. The gray crossover appeared less often on our streets and then not at all. One evening late in the season when the trees along the water had thinned to the idea of themselves, Liam knocked and came in with his hands already out the way you do when you're going to state something plain. I had a pot of stew on the stove and bread that had more crust than patience. We ate. He told a story about a patient who had brought him a folded paper star and how he had unfolded it carefully so he could learn the creases and make one for her the next day. He laughed at himself, soft and a little embarrassed. When the bowls were empty and the spoons quiet on their saucers, he put his palm on the table and looked at me as if he were practicing seeing. I thought I'd feel shattered, he said, not testing the sentence for effect, only balance. I don't. He searched for a word and let it find him. I feel light. He exhaled in a way that made the steam from our cups tilt toward him and then away again, undecided. Thank you for believing what you saw. We washed up together. I wiped the damp rings from the wood with the side of my hand. He dried the last cup and set it upside down the way I do, the way he has always seen me do. On the refrigerator, the lighthouse magnet still held that catering card, now curled a little at the corners. I pulled it down, turned it over, and gave it to him. The back was blank. He smiled and slipped it into his pocket as if blankness were a thing you could carry without fear of losing. When he left, I stood at the window and watched him disappear into the hallway's neutral light. The river hunched its shoulders and kept going. In the sink, a single drop found the lower edge and fell. The room settled into the shape of evening. I sat, folded the lemon towel over the oven handle, and let the quiet be exactly the size it needed to be. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.